HR issues can kill you. One complaint against your company can turn your world upside down. And you spend way too much time dealing with HR when you should be spending your time on making a profit. You should talk to Bambi. With Bambi, get access to your own dedicated US-based HR manager starting at just $99 per month. They get to know you and your business while providing HR expertise and the personal touch you need and want. They're available by phone, email, and real-time chat, so onboarding and terminations run smoothly. Team members reach peak performance, and your business stays compliant with changing HR regulations. And with Bambi's HR Autopilot, you'll automate important HR practices like setting policies, training, and feedback. HR managers can easily cost $80,000 a year, but Bambi starts at $99 per month. Schedule your free conversation today to see how much Bambi can take off your plate. Go to Bambi.com right now and type in Accelerate under podcast when you sign up. It'll really help the show. Spelled BAM, BEE.com. Bambi.com. Type in Accelerate. Welcome to Accelerate Your Business Growth, where we're exploring all sorts of business topics. Experts from around the world join me, your host, Diane Helbig, for a conversation where they share their expertise with all of you. Take what you need when you need it. Featured on Inc.com, Forbes, and MSNBC's Your Business, this podcast is recognized as one of the best podcasts for small business, sales, leadership, social media, and more. When it comes to business, Accelerate Your Business Growth has got it covered. And now on with the show. My guest today is Carol Williams. As a solo business owner, certified business and life coach, and single mom, she knows what it's like to prioritize and pivot while building a life she loves. So after working in the design professions for 18 years, Carol struck out on her own in 2009, combining her passion for psychology and her project management experience. Carol powerfully supports scattered entrepreneurs so they can live their lives and have the business they dream of. Thanks so much for joining me today, Carol.
Well, thank you so much, Diane. It's lovely to be here.
It's great to have you here. I love the scattered entrepreneurs. I have a feeling we all are in some
in some way, yeah. For sure.
Right? So I think I want to start by asking you about procrastination.
Okay.
I could say asking for a friend, but so many of us procrastinate, and I'm really curious to hear your ideas on ways to stop procrastinating.
Yeah. Well, I thank you for asking, because you're right. When I sort of get the knock on the door, it's usually something like, gosh, I know I would just need better time management, or I need to focus more. I got to stop procrastinating, or something like this. And while I understand, and we all want to improve in those areas, and that is in fact what I do for folks, what I will point you to is something that, and this is audio, so you can't see it, but later we'll send everybody the link to where they can get the graphic, right? Yep. I have a visual for you. And visuals are great because then we can kind of locate ourselves in the larger context of everything. So procrastination is one slice of the productivity success cake. And the productivity success cake is the system whereby I help people one step at a time and one slice at a time and one layer at a time uncover what's really going on so that they can then use the advice that they've heard for years. Okay. And so let me help you position this, and then we'll get into any specific questions that you may have regarding procrastination, because that's an awesome, fun topic, at least for me. So if you pictured a cake and you pictured 4 layers, okay, productivity layer, and that's where the excuse me, that's where the procrastination lives. That's on layer 3. But before we get to layer 3, we want to make sure that our foundation, the layers underneath it, are strong enough to allow us as business owners to take in this advice. Because if you just wanted to stop procrastinating, you could buy a book, you could watch a video, you could read articles, but do you really do anything about it? And what I've discovered is there's 2 layers that you really have to have at least a little bit, at least 5 out of 10, if you rated yourself, intact. The first layer, the bottom layer, is something, and you're going to go, yeah, health. The health layer is everything. Too often when I talk to folks that, just like you say, gosh, I got to stop procrastinating. I keep saying I'm going to do this, but I keep not doing it. Then I find that they're not eating properly, that they're hardly sleeping at night. Maybe they don't meditate. Maybe they don't take that quiet time. Those are some of the slices in the health. The next layer up is all about our environment. It's our environment layer. That's your physical space. That's having that circle of support. That's what are you doing to light your own light? And what are your goals that really matter? Okay. Then and only then, and after you've really taken at least a cursory look at those, then you dive into that productivity layer. So I'm going to take a breath right now and ask for some feedback on that much.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. So, most people go directly to the procrastinating, but if I'm hearing you correctly, what you're saying is, wait, first you need to deal with these other layers and get them in the right place, because then it's easier to deal with the procrastination side, right?
Yeah, it's not just easier, it's actually a critical path item. It's because again, if it were just simply a matter of adopting a tip, you would have adopted it already.
Yeah.
You would have adopted it already. So the way when I work with somebody, that's the first thing we do. And that is, I know at the end you'll give like links to my website. There's a quiz on my website where you can like take your own little quiz to see kind of where you are on this. There's no fee for that. So that's a nice way to do it. But let me ask you, after let's pretend that you have done that. You've taken the quiz, you've kind of, you've done the free download regarding the cake, and you've worked your way through some of these other slices. And now you're like, okay, I'm ready to address the procrastination. Let me ask you this, since you're asking for a friend, sure. What does your friend say that he or she would like to do, and what is getting in his or her way?
Well, she would say that there are projects that she would like to finish. And what gets in her way is either other things coming up that are more critical. That's pretty much it. That then they just get pushed down the list.
Yeah, thank you. That's beautiful. It's not specific, but it's enough for me to go on. So when I hear, and so what I'm hearing is, so correct me if I'm wrong. Again, I'm going to bring you into a visual that we don't have here in the podcast. You probably, there's the Steve Covey 4 quadrants. You know what I'm talking about when I say that?
Yes.
Okay. So the top, so people who don't know about this, so in the top of the 4 quadrants, you just create like a cross and then put it in a box. And now you have 4 quadrants, right? So in the top, it's all about what's important. And in the bottom, it's not important. And on the left, it's urgent. On the right, it's not urgent. So I think what you're talking about is quadrant 2, which it would be the top right. So it's important, but it's not urgent. Would that be this project that you want to finish, or projects?
Yes.
Okay. Well, so number 1 is just recognizing and realizing that that's where that's living. So if anybody out here is listening and has the same type of thing, I ask you, where would you put the thing that you're procrastinating about? Would it be urgent and important? Probably not, because you'd be doing it. That's the firefighting. That's quadrant 1, top left. Quadrant 2, it most likely is there. Quadrants 3 and 4, you should probably stay away from 3 and 4 because they're not important. And if you own a business, which you probably do, if you're listening to this podcast, Accelerate Your Business Growth, you should be delegating anything that needs to get done, like, right, that can be done with anybody else that's below the line, or just leaving. Now, when people start working with me, they probably spend a good solid 80% of their time in quadrant 1. And so what I try to do is say, let's shift as much as possible of your time that you're spending in quadrant 2. So let's just say you got nothing below the line, just for sake of argument, and you're 20% in quadrant 2 and 10%. Excuse me, I'm not doing my math correctly. You're doing 80% in quadrant 1 and 20% in quadrant 2. We'd look to flip that. Okay. And so how does that get done? Well, that gets done step by step. It means that you want to do a time diary, like an inventory. Like, what are you doing now? Right?
Yeah.
And so I hate to tell you how unsexy this actually is, but it's pretty unsexy. You kind of just have to take a hard look at, like, all right, what are you doing now?
Well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I have a feeling that a lot of people don't take the time to look at, how am I spending my time, and am I really always spending it on urgent and important, or am I spending it in other places, and how could I be reallocating some of that time?
And so the thing is, the difference between reading a book about this and walking through this with somebody, doesn't have to be me, can be anybody, and anybody that wants to be nice and open and honest, and, like, I'll call it, like, have that fierce love, right? Because I have some fierce love, is to be open and honest and actually do the thing. So the first step, is a time diary. It's like, okay, when do I start work? And, that right there, that can be a problem, because lots of times I work with entrepreneurs who say, oh, I have a really flexible schedule. That's why I'm an entrepreneur. That's why I own a business. Okay, great. Fine. Beautiful. If you had hours, what would they? So right there, that could be a trip up. So that's why I love coaching, is that, sure, there's a framework and there are questions, and underneath each question can be this whole, like, the iceberg. You only see the tip, but really the reality is that you have to deal with everything below the surface. Yes. It could be like some mindset things around, like your time, like how you're spent. I had this one lady who was working a lot, and she was kind of procrastinating around some of her bigger items, like, that she really wanted to get to. She said she didn't have time to do them. And when I said, okay, well, what would you like your work hours to be? And then she kind of stopped right there, like, oh my gosh, I don't know, I said, okay, well, if you had, ideally, what would they be? And she still couldn't answer. I said, okay, what if I looked at her and I said to myself, she wants to end this little gig probably in the next 5 years, based on what I could tell. And I knew her a little bit. And I said, what if you worked like 10 to 3? How would that make you feel? And she's like, oh, I could never do that. And I said, okay, well, what would you like? And she couldn't quite get to it. But as we worked together, what I found is that she would work like 4 to 6 hours a day, but then she'd eat dinner and work more. And then it would spill over to the weekends. And then she'd get in, like, fights with her husband because her husband wanted to do other things and she wasn't making enough money. Right. And then so she tried to hide that because that was embarrassing, and she had some shame around that. So she'd work even harder, but it was all on things that weren't really getting her to where she wanted to be, that quadrant 2 stuff. And the other thing is, she had some mindset stuff, like, I'm not worth it, therefore I'm not going to charge what I want. I've got to be available for other people. and we changed her hours, and we got her really selective on what projects she would take on and what kind of clients she would take on. And after 40 years of marriage, she actually last year made more than her husband.
Wow.
And she didn't work nights and she didn't work weekends. And she just this year, she's still working with me part-time. And she said this year, I just took 2 solid weeks off and I didn't do any work and I'm still making more money than I ever had. And I'm like, well, all righty then.
Yeah.
So, so the answer about procrastination, it's a bigger question.
Right.
But that's where I would begin is where are you spending your time now? Is that in alignment with what you really want? How does it serve you? How does it not serve you? So it's kind of an unpeeling.
All right. So let's stay on time management for a minute.
Sure.
What are some, for lack of a better word, like critical time management secrets that you would,
Yeah.
the listeners?
Yeah. So the critical time management secret, the big thing is, I would say, don't believe that you need to figure it all out at once. Lots of times people will come to me. And in fact, I just had this today's, as we're recording this, it's a Wednesday. And on Monday, I had I have usually a free webinar like once a month. And I had one lady raise her hand. It's an open Q&A, the second half of it. And she said, I really want some better time management. I was thinking about getting myself a calendar system and putting everything on it. And I like everything and I can't decide. I really need to prioritize it all. And I hear this a lot. And while on the surface, that's not a bad idea. I mean, that's a little bit like getting things done, David Allen. It's great. Put everything in your inbox, have that piled high, take a whole weekend to figure it all out and get it all perfect. But what I find in my community is when somebody needs to do that, they don't do anything.
Yeah.
And so what I say is that that's a mistake. And what I would recommend that you do instead, that's the secret part, is just start where you are. And start so simply. So just get one habit at a time. And the first habit I would recommend is that you bookend your day. And here's what I mean by that. Bookending your day means the beginning of your day before you start looking at your email. Decide, okay, hang on, what are my priorities for the day? Now, I have some proprietary forms for this. When you're in my program, you can use them. Otherwise, you could just get yourself out a sheet of notebook paper and do a DIY, right? And you could decide, okay, what are my top main 3 things I want to get done? So help me. And if that ends up being too much, just go to one thing. Now, you get resistance a lot in this. You get resistance on just the one thing because people are like, well, I got 10 things or 20 things. I can't. Okay, just do the one thing because that forward momentum helps you get to the next thing. It's counterintuitive. Okay, so I just kind of gave you tip 3, just have one thing. So going back to tip 2, bookending. So the beginning of the day, just look at your day and say, what are my top 3 things that I want to get done? And when will I do them? Like block in your time. Again, I have some forms. And then at the end of the day, this is where people will fall shy lots of times because they don't want to. First of all, they may not end their day ever until the moment their eyes close. So that's a problem in and of itself. Yeah. But at the end of your day or your work day or whatever, there's 3 questions I have for you to answer. What went well? What didn't go as well? And what will you do differently? And sort of a bonus tip, a bonus secret, if you will, is this is not all about guilt and shame. This is not all about how to, push it ahead and like all that. No, just look at it. Like I meant to, I don't know, get 10 new people on my, I don't know what it would be, like get 10 new people on my list through social media. I'm not sure what I'm going to say. But if you didn't do it because, I don't know, you got an emergency client call and that was more important, well, then then you just simply write it down. You write down like, I got an emergency client call. And then that's it. What will I do differently? Nothing. Or it might be, I'm going to take another look at this because you know what? I don't like emergency client calls. Maybe this is a bad client. See what I'm saying? So it's a debrief each and every time. So that is the biggest secret is besides, doing the inventory, which I've already talked about, is really daily. That's how I start people. When they take my productivity success cake program, which is actually called Discover Your Greatness, that is one of the things we get started right away. You start doing your beginning of the day and your end of the day, and you rinse and repeat. And that walking yourself through it allows for all these aha moments and the eventual transformation of how you approach your time.
Well, and what you were talking about, this debrief, it's an unemotional debrief, right? It's more, It sounds like it's more fact-based.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you're right. It's not judging. It's not emotional. However, it can be deep. So for example, doing this debrief with yourself, you may, if you really take your time with it, you may find that, hang on, I've got an aversion to doing my bookkeeping, and I just don't want to do it. And you can say, like, that can be emotional, like, because there might be some guilt in there around like, oh God, I should do it. I'm not quite making the money I want to make, or whatever you want to do. Yeah. Like, but or some mindset stuff. You may uncover some mindset stuff. Or you may uncover that with me if I'm your coach in the program, right? Is that's maybe holding you back as well.
Right. I get it. Okay. Interesting. And what about prioritizing? Is it we should be doing the quadrants and then prioritizing what's urgent and important? Or,
yeah.
What do you say?
Yeah. So there's a lot to that. So let's go back to the 80-20. So what I recommend is that you work towards trying to do, and this is going to take a little while to get there. I get it. You want to have the bulk of your time in that quadrant too. Like, what you and I are doing right now. I'm on a podcast. Like, if I don't do this today, no one's going to take away my birthday. Right. But it's still important because I want my message to get out there. I don't want people to be able to up-level their businesses. Right. So this is a quadrant 2 thing. But the 80-20, when you have your list and you're prioritizing, what I recommend is that the first thing you do when you're overwhelmed with how much there is to do, go back to the lady I was talking about on Monday, ask the question, how do I prioritize? What I recommend is step 1, do a brain dump. And when I say a brain dump, that means write down. And I recommend you physically write it down. There's something about physically writing it down that it just in your brain, it works a little better. So I recommend you physically write it down. However long that takes you, just get it all out. Everything from buy cat food to make the doctor's appointment to research podcasts to respond to, XYZ customers, lead gen, like whatever's going on with you, write it all down. And then, you're not going to like this, take away 80% of your list. When you take away 80% of your list, then what you're left with is your top 20% priorities. And does that mean you'll never get to that 80%? Well, maybe not. But here's the thing, you're not doing it anyway if you're overloaded, which most of my people are. And when you can just simply look at that 20%, right, and say, okay, these are my most important things, that if you do that like every day or even twice a day, if you need to, however much you need to, if you're in that overwhelm and overload, you will start ticking away at this stuff. You will start getting through this stuff. You will stop being distracted and squirreling all over the place, which is wasting your time because you just have the 20% in front of you and you do one thing at a time. and take breaks. Now I have a bonus for you. On prioritizing, sometimes people don't know how to prioritize.
Sure.
So what I recommend is ask, if you got your list there, ask, is it impactful? Like, is it impactful to my life, my business, like that kind of level? If it is, great, keep it on the list. Another thing is it like a short duration or a long duration? If it's a short duration, it should go towards the top of the list. Cost. Now, cost is going to vary. Like, you can measure cost in a lot of different ways. Like, how much does it cost? If it doesn't cost too much, then you want to put it to the top of the list. So those are the things to think about. Now, so that's great. So you're saying, Carol, do the easy, impactful, low cost things. Well, what about the things that are hard and they're going to take a long time and they cost a lot, but yet they're still important? What do you do with those?
Right.
Any ideas?
You delegate them to someone else?
You could do that. I would recommend that you do that in part.
Okay.
And that the other part you do is to break it down. Break it down so that it is a smaller bite-sized piece that you can then schedule in, and you do it bit by bit and get the ball rolling.
It's so funny because so I'm really glad that you brought in like the personal stuff, like buying cat food and making the dentist appointment stuff, because I think a lot of people leave that stuff out.
Right.
When they shouldn't. But also I love the breaking it down into little smaller pieces, because it's so much easier then to at least get some of it done, which goes to what you said before about then when you accomplish something, it's motivating.
Yeah. Success breeds success. It's amazing.
Yeah, right.
And failure breeds the words of, see, I told you so. You can't do all this. And last time I checked, the invisible hammer was not helpful.
No, never is. And yet we use it so often.
I know.
Oh my gosh, Carol, this is great. I appreciate it. I think this is really valuable information for the listeners and gives them some action steps they can take, but also I'll make sure that the links are in the show notes. And will you tell the listeners how they can find you, please?
Sure. So if you go to unscatterme.com, that's my website. And if you want to learn more about this cake, I just created an updated version of the PDF. And I'm just going to say it's a bit.ly link. So bit.ly/success cake. So bit.ly/success cake. And you'll get the free opt-in there, and it'll take you step by step how to harness the power of this system. So those are the two best ways to reach me.
Excellent. Thank you. As I said, I will make sure that is in the show notes.
Okay.
And thank you so much. And listeners, thank you. You are who we're doing this for. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Accelerate Your Business Growth, a production of Evergreen Podcasts. Discover more episodes of this podcast and explore others at evergreenpodcast.com. As always, continue to prosper and be curious. And if you're looking to get your sales strategy headed in the right direction, pick up a copy of Succeed Without Selling on Amazon or wherever books are sold. Until we meet again on another episode of Accelerate Your Business Growth, goodbye and good day.
Coming up on 5 Minute News, I'm Anthony Davis. You might think it's partisan because maybe it's critical of one side or the other, but it's not. It's just the truth. And I think that's also something that's kind of unusual for Americans listening to the radio or to podcasts, because the news landscape in the States has been so partisan for so many decades. So 5 Minute News is verified, truthful, independent, unbiased, and essential world news daily.